Hello, and welcome to the inaugural episode of the County News podcast, brought to you by the National Association of Counties. We call ourselves NACo. I'm Nicole Weissman, Director of Strategic Communications.
And I'm Charlie Van. I'm County News' senior writer and digital editor.
Charlie, this is a new podcast. It expands on your work at County News, where you've written literally hundreds of stories. So why are we launching a podcast to expand that work?
One of the best parts about my job is actually talking to people in county government, elected officials, staff members, and hearing about the work they do. And the passion that comes through their voice when they talk about work they do that could improve people's lives is palpable, but that doesn't quite make the transition from the interview I do with them to the page when I write it.
There's a place for both, right? There's room for the boiled down story that folks are reading, and then there's a room with this podcast for folks to hear what you hear when you talk to these folks.
Yeah, you're hearing directly from the people who do the work, and hopefully you can hear what I hear.
It's going to be awesome. And in this first episode, you chose elections as the topic we would be talking about. It makes sense. We have this tremendous county role in administering elections. Counties traditionally administer and fund elections. This includes overseeing 100,000 polling places, more than 100,000, and coordinating hundreds of thousands, 600,000 plus, right?
Closer to 1 million.
Unbelievable role for counties here. So who did you decide to talk to get a little more insight about this?
Well, since this is my first podcast, I wanted to have somebody who was experienced on the show. So I picked Brianna Lennon, who's the clerk for Boone County, Missouri, and Eric Fay. He's the Democratic Director of Elections in St. Louis County, Missouri. They have both been putting on a podcast, high turnout, wide margins, for about 3 years. And I figured if anyone could talk about elections, they could.
I'm the county clerk for Boone County, Missouri. We're located right in the middle of Missouri, where the University of Missouri is located.
That's Clerk Brianna Lennon.
I started as an election worker when I was in college, so that was kind of my start.
And that's Eric Fay.
I am starting my 6th year as county clerk, and before that I worked in the Secretary of State's office for Missouri. So I have been in and around in elections for about 10 years and working at the local level for the last 5 or so.
I've been working full-time in elections since 2007. That's when I started at the Board of Elections, and I've been the Director of Elections here in St. Louis County since 2015.
So Eric, you're the Director of Elections. Brianna, you're a clerk. Are these different terms for the same role, or do you have different responsibilities and authorities?
Yeah, it's a little bit different. Brianna is elected, I'm not. So in Missouri, there are some counties that have a Board of Elections, some counties that have an elected county clerk. So in my case, the governor of Missouri appoints a 4-member board, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, that then hire 2 directors, a Democratic director, a Republican director, who then run the day-to-day operations of the election board. And my purview is just election administration and voter registration. Brianna has a more wide-ranging purview than I do, but we operate under, as far as administering elections, we operate under the same statutory framework.
2 big differences between the model that Eric works under and mine is that when he has to do his work, even in elections, his board has to approve everything. So he's got an oversight board. My role, because it's elected, I have lateral responsibilities with our county commission and other elected officials, but I don't have a separate board that I have to report to. So when I'm looking at putting out a new form for something or putting out voter education, the buck stops with my office. So that has different implications based on how the different counties might implement certain things under the law. But then, like Eric said, we are farther range than just elections. So my office is also in charge of maintaining all of the local records for the county, doing the secretarial work for the county commission, tax rates, merchant licensing, liquor licensing, a much broader field. And then the other thing to note is, especially in Missouri, even the role of county clerk is different depending on what county, because our different counties have different assessed valuations. And the higher assessed valuation you have, the more elections work you actually get to do because you're doing less of other things. And in many of the other counties, the clerk is also the budget officer for the county. And I'm very fortunate for me. We have a county auditor, so I do not have to be the budget officer. We would be considered a mid-sized county in Boone County with 120,000 registered voters. That means we have to recruit anywhere from 250 to 600 election judges or poll workers, for each election. We have anywhere from 40 to 75 polling locations for each election. It's all dependent on the size of the election. So if we expect 15, 20% turnout, we don't have to open as many polling locations, things like that. On an ongoing basis, we still need to do voter registration. We still do voter outreach and education. But the biggest part of the role is actually making sure all of the parts of the election are ready to go. So testing our equipment, creating the ballots, making sure that all the different elements are there so that on election day when voters show up, everything is nice and smooth for them.
St. Louis County is a county of about 1 million people, and I would say a lot of the same challenges that go along with a relatively large urbanized county we have here. I think it's just a matter of scale in many ways. I mean, that's a story of election administration across the country, where generally election administrators from small rural jurisdictions have a pretty wide range of responsibilities, and then those from relatively large urban jurisdictions tend to have a more focused responsibility, and that's the case here as well.
Election and poll workers have been described as the ball bearings that make elections work smoothly. What kind of workforce are you looking at every time you have either a primary or a general election in your county?
So much of our election turnout happens on election day. There's a lot of states that have a much broader ability to do mail-in voting and early voting, and Missouri does not have that. So we have to have enough poll workers to staff enough polling places. Otherwise, people just simply don't have the ability to vote. So just like what you see nationally, a lot of poll workers are retirement age or even older than that. Everybody's trying to make sure that we have enough poll workers and enough poll workers that are interested in coming and staying. It's great when we have one-off people that want to come during a busy election and they get really excited about a presidential election. But I really need the people to stay for the local April elections when there's nothing that they find particularly captivating on the ballot, but I still have to have polling places open. It's especially a challenge when it comes to balance between parties because our election judges have to be bipartisan. So sometimes I get far more of one party wanting to work than another, and we have to work through that, and recruitment is a challenge.
As you get into larger jurisdictions, there tends to be more of a churn. I think there's a body of research in that regard. But as Brianna mentioned, probably our biggest challenge in recruiting election workers is that bipartisan requirement we have in Missouri law. As the population across the United States has started to sort itself ideologically, where you see, at least in Missouri's case, Republican voters tend to live mostly in rural jurisdictions and Democratic voters live in urban jurisdictions. We need every polling place to have equal numbers of Republicans and Democrats. And so in a county like St. Louis, where Democrats win overwhelmingly, it is very difficult to find enough Republicans. So we actually worked within our state association of election administrators in Missouri for years to change the law to allow people from other counties to work as election workers in bordering counties. And we were able to have that implemented, and that has helped. But overall, I would say since I started in this business, the challenge of recruiting enough election workers, like writ large, is probably better because of our case of technology with the advent of electronic poll books. And we do have some early voting now in Missouri. We've been able to reduce the number of polling places we use. We don't need as many poll workers overall, but we just don't have enough Republicans in our county to round it out. So we really need that.
How are you doing your jobs differently now in terms of recruitment compared to when you started your positions?
We have tried to get more flexible when it comes to how long poll workers have to be there. Poll workers would always say, if it wasn't a 15-hour day, we'd be happy to do it. Because of all of the efficiencies we now have in the administration part of being a poll worker, we have enough room and flexibility that we could introduce a split shift model. So we kept it pretty limited, but it's been very popular where if you have somebody, because you have to be the same political party. So if you're a Republican and you have a Republican friend and both of you agree to do it, then you come to us and you say, here's my partner, 2 of us will sign up for it, and we will split a day to be very helpful.
I invited you to because if it was going to be my first episode, I wanted to have at least 2 experienced podcasters. So tell me about high turnout, wide margins, where it came from, how it developed into the 3-season dynamo it is now.
Dynamo is generous.
I like it a lot.
It started at the end of 2020, like a month after the November 2020 election. It was becoming very clear through COVID, there was limited ability to get together. Conferences are very important to the elections community because we can sit and talk about details like this, like having conversations about how to recruit poll workers and getting ideas from each other. And we didn't have any of that in 2020, which arguably was one of the times we needed it the most. And I kept thinking of all of these questions like, well, how could you do ballot styles differently? Or I wonder how you implement that thing, because I'd see that and I'd go, man, I'd really love to find out more about that. And so I kind of put out on Twitter at the time, because it was very popular amongst election officials, like, does a podcast exist? Is there something that I can listen to in small segments that would just kind of deep dive into a subject area that is specific to local elections, not just policy, but actual implementation? And everyone was like, no, but it'd be really great if one existed.
Which episodes and conversations with your peers in the field really stand out to you?
We started this podcast to be kind of a for us, by us podcast for local election administrators. But one of my favorite episodes was with U.S. Senator Roy Blunt, who is now a retired U.S. Senator from Missouri. We interviewed him particularly because he was a county clerk in Missouri and he was the Secretary of State in Missouri before he went to Congress. And he worked on a lot of election administration legislation while he was in Congress. But it was fun talking with him about the olden days in Missouri when he was Secretary of State and county clerk, and what that meant to him, and the expertise, how valuable it was when he went to Congress.
Well, I'll take the easy. So we were really lucky in season 2 to be able to go internationally. We went to a conference in Hungary, and we also went to Moldova and talked to people that volunteered, and some political campaign people and some federal government people. But I think there's no one particular episode from that trip, but just the overall sense of optimism that came out of it, which I found to be almost kind of cognitive dissonance, because we went over there, the whole conversation was about some of the places where democracy was going away and was not doing well. And in some places literally didn't exist anymore, and they were fighting to get it back. And in talking to the people that worked elections in those spaces, and the kind of optimism and positivity that they had, they were just very uplifting. It was a really good trip, and I think really good episodes came out of it.
What would you tell your fellow county officials who don't work in elections? What should they know about the work you do?
The biggest thing is that even though elections are cyclical, because I run into this, I think, in my own office, like working in county government is like working in a fishbowl, not just for the public, but for your colleagues in different offices. So there will be times when you see a pretty quiet office in elections, because yes, we have things to do all the time. We have voter registration and all of that, but it's not going to be a deluge of people, like a general election is going to be. And just because it seems quiet doesn't mean that we're not working on things. There is still stuff that is going on. And it sometimes gets lost when people get used to seeing things that are quiet. When it starts getting very busy, unless you have worked it before, it's hard to know what that level of busy is. And we did, I will say, in our county especially, we really leaned into it this year, and we worked with our county collector, because just like how we need election judges, during tax season, the county collector's office needs temporary workers to help serve the people coming in that are paying their bills. This year, instead of hiring temp workers, because he had a hard time finding temp workers, I offered 2 of my staff to go down there and help out during tax season. People almost couldn't believe it. Like, why would you do that? Like, who's going to pay it? Well, I'm going to pay it. They're my people. I'm just, trying to build some camaraderie. We're trying to do some, like, hey, you'll learn what it's like during the busy season during the collector, and you can bring that information back, and they can learn about what it's like being busy in election space and things like that. But I think everybody's role in county government is important and narrow. like, I would like other elected officials to make a conscientious effort to come observe a very busy election or come be around the office when it's happening, so that when they start hearing from voters, oh, I didn't get my ballot, and I asked for an absentee ballot 2 weeks ago and I didn't get it. And what the reality is like, no, we got the application for it 2 days ago, and you might have filled it out, but you forgot to send it to us in time. These are the kind of conversations across county government that you want to have before things happen. And then it helps in case there's an emergency or some sort of crisis that comes up. Then you've got a whole bunch of people in county government that know how things operate.
Eric, what are you excited about in the upcoming election?
One of the things that keeps me so engaged in this work is the variability of it, but also kind of the anticipation of it. Elections is somewhat unique in that there's a finality to it. And election day is going to come and it's not going to move. I heard a person describe it once as, unlike NASA, and they're launching a space shuttle, there's no scrubbing the launch in elections. Election day is coming, whether you're ready for it or not. And so it's a pressure cooker. And one way to describe an election official is kind of like a large event planner. And most people can understand the difficulties in planning large events and the stress that goes along with that. So every election is a little bit different, and every election is a challenge. And that's why one of the reasons I enjoy this work. If you are a county official anywhere in the United States and you have not visited the election office in your county, please do so, because your constituents are going to ask you about elections. And just because you've maybe run in an election, administering an election is completely different than running in an election. So please reach out to your local election administrator and ask them for a tour. I would be shocked if they said no. Most of us want to show people what happens in our office, how we do things, how everything works. Voter registration, voting machines, ballot counting, auditing, all those things. We want to show people how those things work. So if you haven't done that, do it.
What do you feel about your field as either underrepresented or misrepresented in either the mainstream media or general conversation?
I would hate for elections to get the reputation for being like, oh, we're so underappreciated. I would wish that more people would look into the checks and balances that are part of it. It's the number one thing we hear from poll workers, especially if there are doubtful poll workers that we have recruited in, because we like to do that. When people start asking a bunch of questions, we say, hey, you can see behind the curtain if you want. You can come in and you can help make sure that the election works. You can be a part of it. And we will get people like that. And every time they will say, I just had no idea how much went into making sure, people sign. It's always two people signing off on things. There's always paperwork involved that makes sure that we can track everything. We have everything accounted for. There's things that are sealed and locked and everything else. And they're just like shocked that all of this effort and planning went into things.
On that point, I think a particular challenge for election administrators right now is kind of that dynamic that public opinion pollsters have found with members of Congress, how when voters are polled on that topic, what do you think of Congress? What do you think of your member of Congress? That a lot of people will say, oh, Congress is terrible. I hate Congress. What do you think of your member of Congress? Oh, he or she is, pretty good. I voted for that person. And we kind of have that dynamic in election administration now, where since especially 2020, there's at least a segment of Americans out there that have a lot of doubt about the way elections are administered. But then if they're asked, well, what do you think about the elections in your particular county or your community? They'll say, well, yeah, I was a poll worker, or I knew somebody that worked the polls, or I voted, and I have confidence in that. But those guys over there in that other state, who knows what they're up to? And I don't know that anybody has the silver bullet to solve that problem or to solve that issue yet. And I hope we can keep chipping away at building confidence kind of nationwide. There are a number of checks and balances in place. There will be some mistakes in some places from time to time, but there are procedures in place. There are laws in place to make sure elections are conducted correctly.
Such a great conversation, Charlie. Thanks for talking to our awesome guests. If folks want to hear more from them, what's that podcast again?
called High Turnout, Wide Margins. You can hear it wherever you hear podcasts.
Thank you again to our guests. And before we go, we want to remind folks about the upcoming 2024 Legislative Conference coming up February 10th through the 13th. It's an opportunity for nearly 2,000 county officials to help shape NACo's policy agenda, engage with members of Congress, network with federal agencies, and generally get to spend time with one another here in DC. For more information about that, visit naco.org/LEG. And finally, don't forget to subscribe to the County News Podcast, available wherever you like to get your podcasts. Stay up to date with our latest episodes and explore more dimensions of county governance. Get started by visiting naco.org/podcast.